So Boys and Girls Champs 2025 is over, but there's still concerns about some of the issues that came up during Champs. False starts, overseas students, quotas, officiating in general. Whole heap to talk about on this edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for being here. With me in studio, we have the president of ISA, Keith Wellington. We also have with us the head coach of Calabar and Hydel, Corey Bennett, sports reporter and track and field commentator Renata Brown with us, along with Champs Meet director Anthony Davis. So we have the right people to answer the whole of your questions. And guess what, guys? You can start WhatsApp me again. Our WhatsApp number 876-254-0693. 876-254-0693. Give us your first name, give us your general location. Before we started them though, we spoke to our friends in the sports department who have been covering Champs this year and of course for a number of years to ask them what they thought about the issues that came out during Champs this year. Take a look.
The large amount of false starts to start with, pun intended, and just the fact that we kept seeing on the reaction times that were not called back for being illegal, and then people having been disqualified retroactively. It's not something that we see happen a lot internationally, and I thought that was a big letdown for championships. As it relates to quota, it doesn't just deal with overseas athletes, it deals with any transfer from another school. Generally, if you transfer from another school, you have to sit out a year. Yeah? If you're going to sixth form, then you can compete automatically. But you can't have more than 2 such people being in that quota. In the case of Kingston College, the eventual winners, they were flagged for 6 prior to the championship starting. And then another school wrote to ISA to say, hey, Casey has 3 or 4 people running in class 1, which should fall under the quota. So that's something that some answers need to be given by ISA and Kingston College.
Unfortunately, this year's staging of ISA's Boys and Girls Champs really was dominated by the number of false starts that were in the 5-day meet. Over 60 or at least 60 false starts at any meet is an issue. I would want to say it's almost like overkill, but it has to be a mixture of incompetence and or faulty equipment. Now, mind you, there were some glaring false starts, but when you look at the disparity between some of the things that were credited as false starts and some that weren't, questions were raised, and unfortunately the meet was overshadowed by that. So there were 2 athletes that were pointed out, Jerry Clement and Rashawn Lee, as being athletes who would push over Casey's quota, because you get 2 quota athletes. Casey said, no, we spoke to ISA about these athletes, so there shouldn't be an issue. However, ISA said Clement did not meet the exclusion to the quota rule. So they took out an athlete, Dylan, who was already a part of the 2 quota, disqualified him and put in Clement. And that for me was a strange thing.
The biggest talking point coming out of Champs, unfortunately for Casey and Hydel, who won the respective categories, was the false starts. 50 or 60 false starts. It was absolutely ridiculous, and it was an eyesore for most of the people watching it, including myself. Imagine, for the first time in the history of track and field, we see a thing where them call a retroactive false start. So, an athlete is supposed to have false started in the instant of the race, but he was allowed to run the race, qualify for the next round, and then hours after, we are here see a man false start retroactively.
Obviously the false start whole thing, reaction time and all of that. Of course, the machines can malfunction. So that was a bit of concern for me. And then, of course, the controversy with the non-quota athletes and who is a quota and who is a non-quota and what's going on and persons losing points. And of course, with all the problems and the challenges, I think Corey Bennett had really lashed out at the officials. because of Jamal Stevenson. That's the biggest issue when it comes to the false start.
We had a scenario where the meet manager has come forward and he has said the equipment was faulty. That in itself is very, very embarrassing.
All right, so where to start with all of that? Where to start? Well, let's start with the false start issue, because that seems to be the most egregious from observers, from participants. And Renardo, let me start with you. And I should say, before Renardo starts, anybody who say I'm in Calabar colors, I'm absolutely not. My Moran Bay High wears green, and one day we will rise again like a phoenix. I'm calling it into being. So Renardo.
I'm not in St. George's College colors. I went to Bridgeport. But
you're neutral.
I am. But I think most of the guys there pointed it out. In terms of the false start, I think we had 18 in the 100 meters on day number 1 alone. A couple of those in class 3 for the boys. There were 3 of them from lane 7 alone. Now, the issue there is whether or not it was the system that was causing these false starts, or was it that the officials did not understand how to read the system. I point out that some of these false starts were blatant. So it's not like all of them were marginal false start and then we couldn't see them. So some of them were blatant, but the ones that weren't, and I think a little bit later on, Corey, of course, would talk about Jamal Stevens, for instance, in the semifinal of Class 1 was 100 meters from lane 4, the retroactive false start. So his reaction time 0.089. So it is quicker than 0.1. However, Dante Watson from Jamaica College in Heat 2, lane 4 as well, credited with the same reaction time, 0.89. Now, the difference with that was that Jamal Stevens... 0.089. Yeah, 0.89. So Jamal Stevens was disqualified retroactively for a false start, but Dante Watson wasn't. So these are some of the questions that persons have in terms of why was that? Is it that it was not picked up? Is it that the starters overlooked it? And a lot of it is really consistency or inconsistency. And then it came down to the boys' 110-meter hurdles, where 3 athletes were deemed to have false started. They were disqualified and then reinstated. I understand that if it's the Jamal Stevenson thing. But you still also had a number of reaction times that were way out. I think there were reaction times like minus 6 minutes 20, minus 2 minutes something. And if you're looking at that, you're thinking, no, it can't just be the starters. It has to be the system. And I don't think a lot of persons up to now have really, got the information to say, yes, the system was the problem and not the starters, or it's a combination of the starters and the system. And I believe that a lot of persons really want to get a conclusion as to what really transpired during champs.
And before we get comment from Mr. Davis or Mr. Wellington, Mr. Bennett, let me bring you in on that same issue, the false starting and the retroactive false starting. My apologies, new phone, I need to put it on silent. Go ahead for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is just from a personal standpoint, where as a coach of Jamal Stevenson, we would have done the work to qualify for the finals. We had 2 boys in the finals, Shaquin Gordon and Jamal Stevenson. And just to be told, I mean, there's a 10-minute call at the call room for athletes to enter the call room to get onto the track. We were told probably about 5 minutes before that call that there's a new list, there's a new start list for the finals. And when we were listening, just kind of casually, we didn't hear Jamal's name. And that's how we knew. And when I went to the call room to inquire, they were clueless as to what happened. And I took the young man on the track to find out from the start as what happened.
All right, hold that thought. We'll pick up when we come back after the break. And remember our WhatsApp line, 876-254-0693. Give us your first name, your general location. We'll soon come.